This is a job for Superman.
Freddy Cat here, going back in time to remember the amazing early animated history of Superman. From the classic 40s cartoon shorts to the 1988 Superman animated series, the Super Friends, and Filmation's classic Superman from the 1960s. And if you thought the first time Superman teamed up with the animated Justice League was on the Super Friends, have I got a surprise for you. First, we have to look at the amazing Fleischer movie shorts of the 40s that are now in public domain, which is amazing considering how much money and effort went into their production. The first episode in the series, simply titled Superman, was released on September 26, 1941, and was nominated for the 1941 Academy Award for Best Cartoon Short Subject. We only get a glimpse of Krypton from a great distance as it explodes right in front of our eyes. We are then hurriedly given Superman's origin, which makes no mention of being raised by the Kents, simply that it was placed in an orphanage and grew to maturity. Then we get the famous introduction to Superman's powers, starting with faster than a speeding bullet.
More powerful than a locomotive. Able to leap tall buildings at a single bound.
The voice of Superman for the series was initially provided by Bud Collyer.
This looks like a job for Superman.
Who also performed the lead character's voice during the Adventures of Superman radio series. Joan Alexander was the voice of Lois Lane.
Lois, what are you doing here?
Oh, just getting the woman's angle on this story.
A role she also portrayed on radio alongside Collyer. These two would go on to do voices of Superman and Lois in the 1960s Filmation Superman animated series.
Well, you might say that, Lois.
Up, and away!
In that series, Lois was sometimes voiced by Julie Bennett as well. According to Wikipedia, the Superman radio show lasted from 1940 to 1951. It famously was part of a campaign for racial and religious tolerance in which Collyer did a Time magazine interview for. One of the techniques that Fleischer Studios used that made Superman's movements so realistic was called rotoscoping. This is a process of tracing animation drawings from live-action footage. The rotoscope machine was actually invented by Max Fleischer. Filmation used the same technique, which was likely used for this action scene for the 77 Batman series. While they were still working on Superman, Fleischer Studios became Famous Studios, when the Fleischer brothers were no longer on speaking terms. During this period, the cartoons were heavily influenced by America's war effort in World War II. From 1948 and 1950, two live-action movie serials would be released starring Kirk Alyn as Superman. But for most of the flying sequences, they still relied on an animated version of Superman. George Reeves took over as Superman in the 1950s for television, and for that decade there were no new Superman cartoons until 1966, when Filmation produced The New Adventures of Superman for CBS television. In order to get the contract for the TV rights for Superman, Lou Scheimer brought in family and friends into the office to give the impression that they had a busy, productive studio. Coincidentally, when the Fleischers got Superman in the early 40s, they didn't even want the project, knowing it would be a huge challenge. They asked for more money than they thought it was worth, but they still ended up getting the contract from Paramount. The New Adventures of Superman series also featured segments starring Superboy, voiced by Bob Hastings, who would go on to voice Commissioner Gordon in the 90s Batman the Animated series.
Let's go, Crypto. We've got work to do.
Classic TV fans know him as Elroy Carpenter on McHale's Navy. Superboy also featured Superman's dog Krypto. For its second season, the show became the Superman Aquaman Hour, which, before the Super Friends, actually featured the Justice League's first animated adventures together.
The Justice League of America.
Only 3 Justice League episodes were made as part of the Superman Aquaman Hour, Hawkman, Green Lantern, the Flash, and the Atom each got 3 solo adventures apiece. The Teen Titans even got 3 short episodes.
The Teen Titans.
Scientists still have not discovered what that black mass was on Kid Flash's head. Robin was missing, as well as Batman from the Justice League, most likely because Filmation hadn't acquired the rights just yet. The show's 3rd season became the Batman-Superman Hour in 1968. Superman returned for one last season on CBS after that, but all the episodes were reruns.
Great Scott!
According to IMDb and Wikipedia, Jackson Beck, who had narrated and did voice work on the radio show, was the voice of Perry White on the New Adventures of Superman.
Where are you going, Kent? Be right back, Chief.
While Jack Grimes, who had played Jimmy Olsen on the radio shows last year's, was the voice of Jimmy Olsen once again for Filmation.
Luckily, I'm wearing my Superman signal watch.
One popular element from the Silver Age of comics, Jimmy Olsen's emergency signal watch, first appeared on television on the New Adventures of Superman. It first appeared in comics in 1958. Ted Knight was friends with Lou Scheimer and did some narration on a few episodes and voice work, including lots of voices on the Batman series.
Overruled.
In 1973, he would become the narrator of the Super Friends.
In the Great Hall of the Justice League.
The series was one of several that sparked the anger of Action for Children's Television, a grassroots organization formed in 1968 and dedicated to improving the quality of television programming offered to children by ruining it and making it as boring as possible. The biggest complaint was that Superman actually threw punches, as superheroes tend to do from time to time. Should have been called the Action for No Action in Cartoons Act. The series featured several villains from the comics such as Lex Luthor, Brainiac, the Toyman, Titano, and this not very comic book accurate version of Parasite. And poor old Brainiac was still looking for a decent pair of pants, even back then.
I just want some pants. A decent pair of pants.
And that's why Brainiac turned to a life of crime.
Great Scott!
For the 70s and 80s, Superman was back with the Super Friends starting in 1973, followed by another season in 77 and several more seasons until the final season of the Super Friends, but this time it was entitled The Galactic Guardians in 1985.
Superman! Right. And the show's over, gentlemen.
The voice of Superman during the Super Friends era was Danny Dark, who was famous for doing voice work for many commercials for various products including Keebler Cookies, Chevy, AT&T, Kmart, and Texaco, just to name a few. The Super Friends had a lot of memorable Superman episodes. Superman One Small Step is one of the Lost episodes. In it, Superman helps a boy who becomes unable to walk due to a bear attack and a loss of his dog. With the help of fake kryptonite and an evil robot, Superman gets the boy to act heroically and save Superman, and once again walk in the process. The tone of this episode is a lot like The Adventures of Superman TV series that starred George Reeves back in the 50s. It sort of reminds me of the episode The Birthday Letter about a crippled young girl. Another Lost episode, Video Victims, actually pits Superman up against what appears and sounds like Pac-Man. Wonder Woman and Superman get chomped. This episode also gives us a look at Bizarro's world.
Yesterday's news! Don't read all about it!
Now, I've read the reason ABC didn't air the Super Friends in 1983 was because the Super Friends were also in syndication and ABC didn't want to compete with reruns that were airing all week. There seems to be some confusion with the so-called Lost episodes, as Wikipedia states except for 3 episodes, none were shown until 1995 on USA Network, but IMDb shows a lot of these episodes airing between the 83 and 84 season. All of the Lost episodes are currently on DVD though. In the episode Terror from the Phantom Zone, Superman faces escaped criminals that he himself put into the Phantom Zone. The criminals expose Superman to red kryptonite, forcing him to bring out the Supermobile in search of a cure. On the Lost episode Return of the Phantoms, the villains once again escape and travel into the past to destroy Superboy. Luckily, Superman and Green Lantern show up to save the day, even though according to comics at the time, anybody traveling into the past where that person already exists would instantly become a phantom until they return to their own time. On the last season, they even dealt with the death of Superman. Bet you can't guess how that one turns out by the end.
Great Scott!
But my favorite episode of the Super Friends has to be History of Doom, where we get to see a post-apocalyptic world destroyed by Lex Luthor and the Legion of Doom, and we get to see the origin of Lex Luthor, which involves Superboy.
It's the never-ending battle for truth, justice, and the American way.
After the Super Friends came the Ruby Spears-produced Superman in 1988, airing on CBS. It came out the same year as the live-action syndicated Superboy TV series, which at the time was the 50th anniversary of Superman's creation. The series had DC Comics' Marv Wolfman as the head story editor, and comic artist Gil Kane provided character designs. This series incorporated music from the Superman Christopher Reeve movies, adapting the John Williams score into the intro,
More powerful than a locomotive.
and many elements from the John Byrne comic book revamp that happened in 1986. That was a reboot of Superman that had been in the works since Crisis on Infinite Earths, where Superman's history as Superboy in the comics was no longer canon. Superman's powers were decreased, and Lex Luthor was turned into an evil, rich businessman. I guess they thought it was more 80s that way. The Daily Planet characters were all there. Superman was voiced by Bo Weaver, who went on to do the voice of Mr. Fantastic in the 1994 Fantastic Four animated series. Besides the regular Superman adventures, the show had a segment entitled The Superman Family Album, which devoted a few minutes every episode to Clark Kent's adventures as a super kid. It showcased Clark's life growing up. Lex Luthor was voiced by Michael Bell, who did the voices of Bruce Banner in the 80s Hulk cartoon, Duke in the G.I. Joe series, Plastic Man, Zan and Gleek on the Super Friends, and a lot of other cartoons of the 80s. Zod made an appearance in the episode The Hunter. The prankster shows up in the episode Triple Play, voiced by Howard Morris, aka Ernest Bass from the Andy Griffith Show, and Adam Ant. Johnson Kent was voiced by Alan Oppenheimer, who played Rudy Wells on The Six Man or Man between 1974 and 75. He was also the voice of Skeletor on He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. His last job was for a new Tom and Jerry cartoon in 2023. He also did the voice of Frady Cat, believe it or not, a cartoon series from 1975 that ran as a segment of Uncle Croc's Block for only 12 episodes. And that's Frady, F-R-A-I-D-Y, no relation. My name is F-R-A-D-Y Cat, and of course I'm much more handsome and extremely brave. Tress McNeil was the voice of Martha Kent. She went on to do the voice of Dot from the Animaniacs. Jenny McSwain did the voice of Lois Lane and is listed on IMDb as voice director for a huge number of animated series. Mark Taylor was the voice of Jimmy Olsen. He played on movies like Inner Space and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Perry White was voiced by Stanley Ralph Ross, who wrote for the 1966 Adam West Batman series on every fourth episode. He also wrote for the Monkees, and he did development work for the Wonder Woman TV series, starring Linda Carter. There were only 13 episodes in all, which is a shame because it's definitely worth watching. Well, hey, please check out all the other videos on the Frady Cat Cartoons channel. Of course, the focus of this channel is animation and entertainment. We look into Saturday morning's past. We have original cartoons and parodies for you as well. I just want to create a fun new universe of characters also for the world to enjoy. It's kind of a crazy dream of mine. I like to see Frady Cat holiday specials on television, Frady Cat dolls, Frady Cat action figures. Oh, of course, I can't forget Uglug and Claw the Kung Fu Cat. I also like to see if we can get an interview with Superman someday, but he's always out fighting crime and saving cats from trees. Say, maybe that's how I could get an interview with Superman. Climb a tree, get stuck, never get down. Never mind. Well, thanks so much for watching. Please hit like, comment, let me know what you thought about this video, what you'd like to see on future videos. And what's the other thing? You like, comment, subscribe, and y'all have a great day. Frady Cat the movie would be pretty awesome too.